All right, I'm going to go through how I tie my copper johns. I got a size 14 curved nymph hook in the vise, and I'm using a UTC 70 in black. One of the main things I want to point out with how I do this is make sure you use any kind of flat thread, UTC or nano silk or nothing, no uni stuff or anything. It's got to be a flat thread. I'll explain why in a little bit. But what I did here is I just kind of covered the tag end of my lead so that nothing kind of unravels or splays out or anything like that. This step is not particularly necessary, but it is something I do on a lot of my Buyouts tailed nymphs. I build up a little bit of a thread ball at the base of what my body's going to be, and I'm going to use a little bit of this resin here to kind of cover that. And basically what I do is it just makes a little spot in the back, kind of like where you would put a hot spot, but it helps to splay out the Buyouts a little bit. I don't do it all the time, but I figure for the video I'll include it on there if you want to include it on any of your other Buyouts tailed nymphs. Get a little shot in the top, the bottom. You don't really need a whole lot. I just want to make sure that it's a even little round ball. Even this one little piece out here. Get up there. There we go. Just hit that with the torch real quick. And again, not completely necessary, but it's nice to have that in the back and splay your Buyouts out a little bit. Plus, I kind of like the way it looks. We'll just unravel that. Don't unravel all the way, or else your thread will pick that resin apart and flake it off. So these are just regular, just standard black goose Buyouts. I'm going to grab 2 of these. I feel bad for anybody watching this because you're about to watch the painful process that is me tying in Buyouts. I think we all have things that we're particularly good at or particularly bad at. If there's one thing I'm not very good at, it's tying Buyouts. I know I've seen a lot of techniques of people doing them, 2 at a time. I just can't do it, no matter how many times I do it. So I get my one set up here on the side, get it where I want, and get it locked in. And what I'll do is I'll kind of angle it a little bit and move it around on the shank just to make sure that it's exactly where I want it. And the wraps that I have on there now are kind of loose. So what I do is once I get it where I want it, I'll tighten it up. And that actually, I think I pulled it a little bit when I tightened it and shortened it. That should be fine. Nah, I'm gonna take it off. It's a size 14 hook, so if my Buyouts are just way too short, that's gonna bug me. So I'm just gonna redo this quick. Want that to come straight off. Line that up the best you can, and always remember it's gonna roll in the shank a little bit on you as soon as you get the thread around it. So if you kind of adjust for that, you'll be in good shape. So a nice soft wrap, just to get it on there, splaying out the way I want. We'll angle it down, and now these are tight wraps to lock it in. And one on the back side too. And again, listen, like I said, I know it's probably painful watching, but Buyouts are not my thing. I've had trouble with Buyouts ever since the day I started tying. Never really been something that I'm able to tie in without a problem. And now that I see that they're at least acceptable, I'm just going to lock them in, call it a day, cut my losses. They're not perfect, but you know what? Good enough. Now, I tie all of my copper johns with 2 wires. I don't like using 1 wire. I like to show a little bit of segmentation. Here I've got a Chartreuse and a black. I'm going to cut these even. Do not use your good scissors to do this. I have a pair of crap scissors that I keep laying around just to cut wire with. And what you want to do is you want to hold them tight as you bring them down the side of the shank, just to make sure that everything is smooth. Now, the reason why is because going back to what I said in the beginning about a smooth thread, a smooth flat thread is we're going to build up a little bit of an underbody, and I want my wire to lay nice and flat, connecting with no gaps. And the way that you do that is you set up a nice smooth underbody so that the wire can just ride up the shank nice and evenly. If you've got a round thread that's creating all kinds of divots and everything, your wire is going to want to follow that. And if you watch here when I spin my thread, the reason why I'm spinning it is as you wrap it, now watch right there at the base, you can see it open up and get flat again. the more you wrap your thread, the more it starts to wind together and becomes round. So sometimes you just have to unravel it, make it flat again, and you're good to go. So that's a pretty smooth underbody. That should be fine for our wire. Throw a quick hitch in here just so I don't lose anything. Now when you wrap the wire, what you want to do is make sure that you apply a pretty reasonable amount of force to it. You can really hold these tight. And the reason why you want to do that is because the tighter you hold them when you wrap them, the more they're going to want to just stay together. And you're not going to have to adjust anything, and you can just wrap them free. Now right there I got a little bit of a gap there. So if I just kind of, I'm going to have to take my needle nose here. Very underrated tool on the bench is a pair of needle nose. I'll crimp those together. And now that they're together, if I hold down with a good amount of pressure, every wrap after that, all the way up the body, should be nice and tight and touching, no gaps. And that wire is just going to follow that nice smooth underbody. And that's how you get a nice smooth look with your Copper Johns. A lot of times you see Copper Johns where the wire is just kind of all over the place. A lot of that has to do with a really messy underbody. So UTC thread or any kind of flat thread that's going to lay flat on the hook, that'll help you get this body. And I do these in a lot of colors. I do red and black, chartreuse and black. I have an olive and black that I use. What I like about this is I think it kind of doubles as a green caddis larva. Obviously, it's a nymph with some flash, but if you're in a system where you got a lot of those little green larvae, this does a really nice job. There's a river that I fish that is just loaded with larvae, green caddis larvae, and you can really get into fish pretty well if you're mimicking that. But I've thrown hare's ears and this pattern here, and they don't slow down at all. So I think it doubles as a nice caddis larva. This is a piece of holographic tinsel. We got to lay that down first. Pull that tight. And once you get that secured, our wing case material is going to be just a piece of this black Swiss straw. It's really, really good stuff for wing cases. If you never use it, I mean, I really honestly think it's just a piece of tissue paper, but it's a really good material for wing cases. I'll get that tied in here, and you want to snip that off towards the front of the bead. Get in there. I had a hard time getting my point in there. Here we go. We'll get all that kind of secured down. Now what I'm going to use for the thorax, Copper Johns call for peacock. For this color, I like these black peacock sticks. And if you go down to the base, you get these really smaller, finer strands that aren't going to stick out as much. And these have a really nice looking, kind of like a purple hue to it when the light hits it. So the black are definitely my favorite. Now, when you wrap these in, you can just go ahead and wrap them if you want. But obviously people have a number of ways to secure herl. I like to just wrap it around my thread. Gives it a little bit of extra durability. You can do a dubbing rope if you want. There's a way to do a dubbing loop and just wrap the herl into kind of like a chenille type thing. That's a good way to do it too, but I don't bother with the dubbing rope when I'm just doing a thorax because, you know, I'm going to do what, 3 or 4 wraps at the most, so I don't really need a whole lot. So I'm just going to give this a few wraps, get that cinched in around my thread. And you can see how it's nice and uniform. You know, the stems sometimes, if you get it twisted, the stems can mash the herl fibers down, make your peacock look really crappy. But wrapping it around like this, you can see that it makes a really nice uniform, kind of like a peacock herl chenille, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'll get that wrapped around. Remember I said earlier, you want those nice thin fibers. That's what gives you a really nice thorax on this fly. If you go up any higher and you get the really thick, bushy herl, that's not really going to give you the look that you want. Get that secured. Good. Now we'll get the wing case wrapped over. This is what I do with a lot of my wing cases. I take my I take this needle here, kind of put it right in at the base, fold it over, and that'll give you a nice little crease that extends back to the body. And that's kind of what I like. Nice little trick there for your wing cases. Get the flash over the top. Get all that cinched in. Now, I don't normally cut this part with the scissors because you're going to have a whole bunch of material kind of overlapping. So I'm just going to snip this off with a razor blade quick. I realized before this video I was going to get a new razor blade because this is getting really dull. But I'll still do the job. It's going to be a little bit, and you know what? As soon as I cut that, I just kind of realized I didn't put the legs on, but normally I would have put the legs on before I wrap the thorax, but that's not a big deal. Let me just get this clamped down real quick. You can still put them on because there's a little bit of a gap there behind the bead. So normally I put the legs on before I do everything that I just did, but it's not a big deal. I can still put them on now. For the legs, I'm going to stick with black. Black Buyouts, black legs, black bead. Because like I said, I think this can double as a caddis larva, so the black in the front is important. I'm just going to use regular partridge. I'm going to find a feather here with some longer strands. I figure this guy will be good. Now what I do with these is I get the point of my scissors slipped all the way in as I hold it tight, and I'm going to get that entire middle section of that snipped right off of there. So get that out, clean it out with your fingers a little bit, and I'm going to have that notched feather kind of like that. Pretty common way of doing legs. Now you can obviously tie these both in at the same time if you want, but with longer feathers, I like to go on one side, make sure they're where I want them, get that clamped down, and sometimes I do clamp them in at the same time. Either way is fine. Now we're going to kind of twist this around, get the feather straight, get that to lay right where I want that. You don't really have to be too fussy about the second one because you can always just pull the feather. See how it's sticking up a little bit? I'm just going to pull that through a little bit and get it to set where I want. And tighten that down. I actually don't even mind that I forgot to do the legs because I was able to build up a little bit of bulk for my resin. So it actually worked out pretty well. But again, normally I don't do the legs after the wing case. Good. I'll get those tightened down. Got a little piece of hurl out of place there. I think I'm going to want to get rid of that guy. Get that finished up. Good. Get that little thing out of there. That one little errant piece of hurl is kind of bugging me. All right, last step. Copper Johns usually call for the resin on the wing case. Obviously, you don't have to. The fly's fine where it is, but I like the look of it. So I like to get a little bit of it on the base right there where the wing case starts, and then just run a little bead and stream of it up and over. Not too much. You don't want that bubbling out way too much. So I got it in my bodkin here. I'll level that out and smooth it out a little bit and make sure that it's covering what I want. And don't be afraid to manipulate this. It moves around pretty well, and then it'll sit on itself nicely. Cure that up. And that is pretty much it. That's the Copper John, and you can do it in a number of colors.